The fleet saw the planet before the scanners finished naming it. It hung below them like a bruise in space. Dark clouds moved across its surface faster than any normal weather system. Lightning flashed across entire continents. The oceans were not calm blue. They were gray and violent, covered in storms that never stopped. The first report came from Orbital Command. Atmosphere unstable. A second voice followed. Tectonic plates shifting every 3 minutes. Then another. Life signs detected. Large ones. Moving fast. Silence filled the bridge. The expedition was made of 12 species. Scientists, explorers, military observers. They had studied dangerous worlds before. They had survived harsh climates and strange ecosystems. But this planet felt different. One of the alien admirals stared at the holographic projection rotating in the center of the room. The biosign readings were flashing red. This world was not marked on any star charts, he said quietly. There is a reason for that. At the front of the bridge stood the human commander, Elias Ward. His hands were behind his back. His eyes did not leave the planet. Every world has a reason, he replied calmly. The council channel opened. Representatives from each species appeared in floating panels around the bridge. I recommend we abort, one of them said immediately. The data is clear. Surface wind speeds exceed our structural tolerance. Another added. Radiation spikes are irregular. Magnetic storms could disable our systems. Elias listened. He did not interrupt. Finally he spoke. We came to chart the unknown sectors. That includes difficult worlds. This is not difficult, the Admiral snapped. This is suicidal. Elias looked back at the planet. Send the first landing team. The order moved through the fleet. A small shuttle broke away from the flagship and began its descent. Cameras showed clouds swallowing whole. Static cracked through the speakers. Entering upper atmosphere, the pilot reported. The shuttle shook violently as lightning struck nearby. Stabilizers holding. The transmission distorted. Surface in sight. Terrain appears. A loud screech cut across the channel. The image flickered. A shadow moved across the camera. Something large. Fast. Then nothing. The screen went black. No distress signal. No debris. Just silence. On the bridge, no one spoke for several seconds. Then the alarm started. Second shuttle prepared. An alien officer said carefully, with reinforced hull, send it. Elias ordered. The council erupted in protest. We just lost a team. We must reassess. We do not even know what attacked them. Elias did not raise his voice. We gather information by engaging. The second shuttle descended. This time they aimed for a different continent. For a moment, things seemed better. Touchdown successful, the pilot said. Air toxic, but manageable. Scanning. The ground trembled. In orbit. Sensors showed a sudden spike in seismic activity. Commander! Tectonic shift detected directly beneath landing zone. On screen, the ground split open. The camera tilted sharply. Structural collapse. The feed ended in a burst of static. The third team never even reached the surface. A violent magnetic storm swallowed their shuttle. The ship spun out of control and vanished from radar. Within 3 hours, the expedition had lost 40% of its surface crews. Across the fleet, panic spread. Several alien captains began powering engines for departure without orders. Emergency Council convened again. This planet exceeds level 10 hostility, one scientist declared. We formally classify it beyond level 10. That classification means automatic withdrawal. Another added. All eyes turned to Elias. You are leading this expedition, the Admiral said. You are responsible. Elias stepped forward so that his image filled the council display. Yes, he said. Then call retreat. He looked tired now, but not afraid. If we retreat from every world that scares us, we will learn nothing, he said. This world does not want us here, the Admiral shouted. Elias nodded slightly. Most dangerous places don't. He turned to his crew. Begin atmospheric adaptation protocols. Deploy autonomous drones only. No more manned landings until we understand storm cycles. You still intend to continue? The council demanded. Yes. 40% of the expedition is dead. Elias finally raised his voice, but it was steady. 40% did not die because the planet is impossible. They died because we treated it like every other world. The bridge grew quiet again. This is a death world, he continued. It fights back. That means we change how we approach it. And if the death toll rises, someone asked. Elias faced the planet once more. It will, he said simply. Shock moved across the council panels. You admit that? We came unprepared for something this extreme. That was our mistake. The admiral stared at him. Your arrogance is costing lives. Elias turned back slowly. This isn't arrogance. Outside the viewport, lightning flashed again, bright enough to light the bridge. He watched it carefully. We haven't started adapting yet. No one had an answer for that. Below them, the planet raged as if it had already won. But the humans were just beginning. The planet did not calm down after the first losses. It became worse. 3 days after the failed landings, the humans established a small forward base inside a deep canyon. The rock walls gave some protection from the wind. Portable generators hummed under heavy shields. Drones moved in and out, mapping the terrain. For a few hours, it almost looked stable. Then the sky turned black. Orbital scanners detected a megastorm forming faster than predicted. It was not a normal storm. It stretched across half a continent. Lightning struck the ground in constant streams. Wind speeds doubled within minutes. Storm vector change. An alien weather officer said, "It is heading directly for canyon." Shields at maximum, Elias ordered. The storm arrived like a wall. Wind howled through the canyon. Rocks broke loose from the cliffs. Lightning hit the shield dome again and again. Energy levels dropped fast. Shield integrity at 60%. The ground shook. Rain fell in sheets so thick that cameras could not see beyond a few meters. Then something hit the dome from outside. Large. Heavy. Thermal scans showed multiple moving shapes in the storm. Creatures. Massive ones. They are using the storm for cover, an alien guard whispered. The creatures struck again. Claws scraped against energy fields. The dome flickered. 40%. A final blast of lightning struck the shield generator directly. The dome collapsed. Wind and rain tore through the base. Equipment flipped over. One of the support towers snapped and crashed. Fall back, Elias shouted. Emergency transport pods lifted survivors into the air, but debris filled the sky. 2 pods were torn apart before reaching safe altitude. When the storm finally moved on, the canyon base was gone. In orbit, the numbers updated. 70% casualties. The council channel opened again. The alien officers no longer sounded angry. They sounded defeated. This mission is over, the admiral said. We have lost too many. Communications satellites destroyed, another officer added. Ion storms wiped out half our orbital network. Supply drones trying to land were attacked by winged predators that rose out of the clouds. Ground convoys were ambushed by pack hunters that moved faster than vehicles over rough terrain. The planet was not random. It was reacting. We request immediate evacuation, the admiral said. Elias stood in a temporary command shelter built into solid bedrock. Denied, he answered. There was silence on the channel. You are condemning the rest of us, the admiral said quietly. Elias shook his head. No, we were fighting the planet. That was wrong. He turned to his human engineering teams. Phase 2. Within hours, the strategy changed. Portable shield domes replaced fixed bases. Small, flexible, easy to move. If one failed, another could deploy in seconds. Instead of building on flat ground, humans studied terrain maps. They placed shelters along natural fault lines where tectonic movement was slower. They anchored structures deep into the rock, not against it, but with it. Biology teams began studying predator patterns. Drones followed the largest creatures from a distance. They mapped hunting routes and migration cycles. They avoid certain zones during electrical storms, one human scientist noted. Because of magnetic interference, another replied. Equipment was modified in real time. Suits were upgraded to handle sudden pressure changes. Vehicles were redesigned with wider bases to handle shifting ground. Shield frequencies were adjusted after every lightning strike. Alien officers watched in confusion. They are rebuilding in the middle of disaster. One said they should be retreating. Instead of resisting the storms, humans began to predict them. They placed atmospheric disruptors in narrow mountain passes. When megastorms approached, the devices released controlled energy pulses at slightly shifted wind currents, not stopping the storms, redirecting them. Storm paths began to bend around key positions. Predators that once attacked supply lines were studied closely. Humans noticed rival species competing for territory, so they guided them. Using sound emitters and sent drones, they lured one predator group toward the territory of another. The two apex species clashed. Supply routes suddenly became safer. Unbelievable, an alien officer muttered. When tectonic shifts threatened the settlement, humans did not abandon it. They installed deep anchor pylons that moved with the plates instead of resisting them. Structures swayed during quakes but did not collapse. Every disaster became data. Every failure became adjustment. The death toll stopped rising, not because the planet grew softer, but because the humans grew smarter. Weeks passed. The forward zones, once temporary shelters, became stable pockets. Small areas where storms weakened slightly, where predators kept distance, where seismic activity slowed. Alien survivors gathered inside one of the shield domes and watched the outside through reinforced glass. Lightning flashed in the distance. A storm curved away from their position, redirected by subtle atmospheric interference. In the shadows beyond the perimeter, a massive predator paused. It sniffed the air, then turned and moved toward another region. An alien scientist stood beside Elias, staring at the data screens. "They should not be this calm," he said softly. 70% of us are gone." Elias looked at the shifting maps. "We expected heavy loss," he replied. "We just didn't know the shape of it." The scientist watched as new structures were placed exactly along tectonic flow lines. He looked at the storm patterns bending slightly around human devices. He saw predator routes slowly adjusting to avoid human zones. His voice dropped to a whisper. "They aren't surviving the planet." He swallowed. "They're learning it." The warning came too late. Orbital sensors detected pressure shifts across the entire planet. Not one storm, not one fault line. Everything moved at once. Cloud systems merged into a single rotating mass that covered half the hemisphere. Lightning did not strike in lines anymore. It flashed in sheets, connecting sky to ground without pause. Below, tectonic plates shifted in a chain reaction. Mountains cracked. Valleys collapsed. Entire regions sank meters in seconds. Then the migration began. Predator signatures multiplied across every scanner. Large life forms were not attacking settlements anymore. They were moving together, fleeing something deeper in the wild zones. "This is not a storm," an alien analyst said. His voice shook. "It's a planetary reset." The superstorm swallowed 2 remaining alien outposts within minutes. Shields failed under constant electromagnetic overload. Structures broke apart under shifting ground. Supply carriers trying to lift off were pulled down by magnetic surges. Communication channels filled with short bursts of static and screams before cutting out. In orbit, 3 ships lost stabilizers as gravitational fluctuations rippled upward from the surface. Then silence spread across the command network. One by one, status signals vanished. When the storm finally weakened 40 hours later, the expedition numbers updated. 90% lost. Across all species. Only scattered signals remained active, and every one of them came from fortified human sectors. Deep within a stabilized canyon zone, shield domes still glowed faintly. Anchor pylons held firm against cracked stone. Energy grids flickered, but did not collapse. Human teams moved quickly between stations, checking systems. They spoke in short, calm sentences. Grid holding at 60%. Backup reactors online. Perimeter sensors active. No shouting. No panic. Alien survivors began arriving in damaged transports and broken ground vehicles. Their uniforms were torn. Some carried injured crewmates. Many carried nothing at all. They expected chaos inside the human stronghold. They expected grief. Instead, they found order. At the entrance dome, human medics directed the wounded to triage zones without hesitation. Supplies were counted and redistributed immediately. Rations were adjusted based on new population numbers. Large display screens showed live data maps of storm remnants and tectonic movement. The defensive perimeter was intact. Turret systems tracked movement outside, but did not fire unless necessary. An alien officer stepped inside and looked around in disbelief. "How?" he whispered. Elias Ward stood near the central command table. He looked older now, tired, but steady. "Report," he said as another human approached. 72 confirmed survivors from outer sectors. More signals inbound. Structural integrity holding. The alien officer moved closer. "Your sectors, they survived." Elias nodded once. "Most of them." "You built for this?" the officer asked. "We built for worse," Elias replied. In one corner of the command center, a group of alien scientists stared at a projected model rotating above the table. It showed casualty estimates before mission launch. One of them recognized a file. This is pre-expedition data." "Yes," a human analyst confirmed. The model showed survival probability curves under extreme planetary hostility. It did not stop at 40% loss. It continued. 70%, 80, 90. The alien scientist felt his breath catch. "You predicted this level of destruction?" "We modeled it," the human analyst answered. "Worst-case environmental convergence. Multi-system failure. Supply collapse." "And you still came?" the scientist asked. Elias looked up from the command table. "We did not predict it would happen exactly like this," he said. "But we assumed something would." Outside the shield dome, the ground trembled again, though weaker now. The storm clouds slowly drifted apart. Alien survivors gathered in the main shelter, watching humans move with quiet purpose. There were no victory speeches, no celebration of survival, just work. Energy grids were recalibrated, food supplies redistributed based on caloric need, shelter space reorganized to accommodate new arrivals. An alien engineer examined one of the anchor pylons built deep into the canyon floor. "It moves with the plate," he realized. "It doesn't resist the shift." "That's why it's still standing," a human engineer replied. The alien shook his head slowly. "We built to defend against the planet." "You built to endure it," he corrected himself. In the medical wing, human doctors treated alien wounded without hesitation, adjusting equipment for different biology types. No one asked which species they belonged to. They were simply survivors. Hours later, as calm slowly replaced shock, an alien survivor approached Elias. His armor was cracked, his expression hollow. "Did you know this would happen?" he asked quietly. Elias did not answer immediately. He looked at the casualty board. So many names gone. Then he met the alien's eyes. "We assumed it would," he said. The alien stared at him, searching for arrogance. There was none, only preparation, only acceptance. Above them, the planet still rumbled, but softer now. 90% had fallen, 10% remained, and they were standing inside structures designed by a species that never plans for comfort, only survival. The planet did not calm because it felt mercy. It calmed because something changed. Weeks after the great planetary event, the sky above the human stronghold looked different. The clouds still moved fast, but not as wild. The lightning still flashed, but not directly overhead. Small machines now stood across the canyon ridges. Tall metal towers with rotating rings at the top. They hummed softly day and night. Weather towers. They did not stop storms. They nudged them. When pressure built too high in one region, the towers released controlled bursts of energy into the atmosphere. Wind patterns shifted slightly. Storm paths bent just enough to miss the central settlement, only by a few kilometers. But that was enough. Inside the canyon, green patches began to appear, not natural growth, engineered soil beds. Human biologists had studied local microorganisms and found ways to combine them with imported plant strains. The first microzone was small, only 50 meters across, but it stayed stable. Temperature remained controlled. Wind speed reduced. Soil held firm despite tremors. Alien observers watched carefully. "They are terraforming," one scientist said. "Not the whole planet," another replied quietly. "Just pieces." Humans installed deeper anchor pylons into the canyon floor. These were different from the first generation. They extended kilometers into the crust and locked onto multiple tectonic layers at once. Instead of resisting plate movement, they guided it. Seismic readings near human zones began to smooth out. The violent spikes turned into manageable waves. Engineers adjusted anchor tension in real time. Plate shift incoming in 30 seconds. Adjusting anchor 3. The ground trembled. Structures swayed. Nothing collapsed. Outside the perimeter, predator movement changed. At first it was small. Hunting routes curved away from human territory. Migration paths widened around canyon settlements. Large life forms no longer tested the shield boundaries. They circled from a distance. Alien security officers stood on the upper ridge one evening, scanning the horizon. The air was still for once. A massive shape appeared from the dust beyond the perimeter. It was one of the apex predators that had destroyed supply lines weeks earlier. Its body towered over ground vehicles. Thick armored hide reflected fading sunlight. The perimeter alarm sounded softly. Defense turrets rotated but did not fire. The creature approached slowly. Every alien soldier on the ridge held their breath. "Should we engage?" one asked. Elias stood beside them, watching. "Wait," he said. The predator reached the edge of the outer boundary markers. It stopped, its head lifted slightly, as if sensing something in the air. Behind the perimeter, weather towers hummed. Deep anchors vibrated with controlled tension. Microzone plants rustled in steady wind. The human settlement was not chaotic anymore. It was structured, stable. The predator remained still for several long seconds. Then, without roaring or charging, it turned. It walked away. No attack, no challenge, just retreat. The alien officer lowered his weapon slowly. "It chose not to fight," he whispered. Elias nodded once. "It chose efficiency." More changes followed. Data maps showed lower hostility indexes within a growing radius around human installations. Storm frequency decreased slightly in nearby zones. Predator density dropped. The ecosystem was not destroyed. It was recalculating. Human biologists began mapping which plant life could survive within engineered microclimates. They introduced species that strengthened soil structure. Local insects adapted to the new zones and spread outward. The planet did not reject the change. It absorbed it. Alien scientists gathered in observation chambers and compared data from untouched regions to human-influenced areas. The hostility curve drops near them. One said, disbelief clear in his voice. "They are not overpowering the planet." Another added, "They are fitting into its logic." The realization spread slowly through the survivors. Humans were not conquering the death world with weapons. They were integrating with it. They studied its patterns. They respected its cycles. They redirected rather than resisted, and the planet responded. Over time, the safe zones expanded, small at first, then larger, connected by stabilized corridors. Supply lines moved without constant attack. The shield domes were still active, but they were no longer under constant assault. For the first time since arrival, orbital scans showed consistent calm pockets on the surface, all centered on human sectors. An alien scientist stood beside Elias, watching updated environmental charts. "This world killed 90% of us," he said softly. "Yes," Elias replied, "and now it bends around you." Elias looked toward the horizon where the predator had vanished. "It doesn't bend," he said quietly. "It adapts." The scientist considered that. Storm lines curved gently around new tower placements. Tectonic spikes leveled out under anchor control. Predator zones shifted in predictable arcs. The planet was not defeated. It was learning, and so were the humans. Far beyond the canyon, Lightning flashed again, but it did not strike the settlement. For the first time, the death world felt less like an enemy and more like a system adjusting to a new presence. The alien scientist watched the calm readings on a screen and finally understood. The death world wasn't killing them anymore. He looked out over the expanding human-built zones. It was adjusting. The numbers did not lie. Only 10% of the original expedition remained alive. Ships in orbit were damaged but stable. Surface zones were no longer temporary shelters. They were organized sectors, connected by reinforced corridors and stabilized ground routes. For the first time since arrival, there was no emergency alarm sounding. Inside the main command dome, representatives of the surviving species gathered around a circular table. The mood was not angry anymore. It was quiet, measured. Elias Ward stood at the center. "The expedition as it was designed is over," he said plainly. "We cannot restore what was lost." No one argued. "We have two options," he continued. "Full evacuation, return to council space, or we stay and build something permanent." Murmurs moved through the chamber. "Permanent?" one alien asked. "Yes," Elias replied. "A stabilized colony, multi-species, built on the zones we secured." The alien officer who once demanded retreat looked at the environmental charts floating above the table. Storm activity had reduced in a wide radius around human installations. Tectonic shifts were predictable within map sectors. Predator routes no longer cross settlement corridors. "You believe the planet will allow it?" he asked. "I believe it already is," Elias answered. Silence followed. One by one, the surviving captains transmitted their decisions. 2 species chose evacuation. Their numbers were too low. Their governments would demand return. But others hesitated. They had seen the human sectors endure the worst. They had walked through stabilized green zones carved from chaos. They had watched apex predators turn away. Finally, the alien scientist who had first whispered about learning the planet spoke clearly. "My people will stay." Others followed, not out of pride, out of evidence. Construction began within days. What were once shield domes became foundation anchors for larger structures. Microzones expanded and connected, forming controlled ecosystems. Weather towers were increased in number, spaced with precision to guide atmospheric flow. Alien engineers worked alongside humans now, adapting their own technology to local conditions. Supply chains stabilized. Agricultural modules grew stronger with combined biological research. The Canyon settlement gained a name in multiple languages. It was no longer an outpost. It was a colony. High above, the remaining orbital ships transmitted full mission logs back to the Galactic Council. Weeks later, in a distant chamber far from the Death World, the Council reviewed the footage. They saw the initial landings fail. They saw the megastorm consume entire sectors. They saw the casualty report climb to 90%. The official summary was brief. Expedition failure. Extreme losses. Mission objectives incomplete. But the private analysis session lasted much longer. They studied environmental charts before and after human intervention. They watched recordings of anchor systems stabilizing tectonic movement. They examined predator behavior shifts. One counselor leaned back slowly. "They did not conquer the planet," she said. "They aligned with it," another replied. A final note was added to a restricted archive. "Humans are uniquely suited to extreme planetary leadership." Back on the surface, the colony lights glowed softly as night settled in. Storms still existed. The ground still trembled sometimes. This was still a death world, but it was no longer pure chaos. Elias stood on a high ridge overlooking the settlement. Below him, structures were arranged in steady lines. Green zones shone under controlled light. Weather towers rotated quietly against a dark sky. An alien officer approached him. "You could have left," the officer said, "after 90%. "Yes," Elias agreed. "Why risk extinction?" Elias watched a group of mixed-species workers moving across a stabilized platform. No fear in their steps now, only focus. He answered without turning. "Because extinction only wins if you stop adapting." The officer was silent for a moment. Below them, a distant rumble echoed through the valley. The ground shifted slightly. The colony did not panic. Anchor systems adjusted automatically. Energy grids compensated. Towers redirected wind currents forming on the horizon. The settlement held. The planet still tested them, but it no longer broke them. The planet had killed 90%. The remaining 10% followed the species that refuses to die.